The coaching staff is keeping their cards close to the vest regarding a really unfortunate setback at the VMAC today. One of our recent draft picks just had his entire season derailed, forcing management to bring in some emergency defensive depth. Hit that like button and subscribe as we chase our first 1,000 subscribers. The Seattle Seahawks roster took a sudden hit as fullback Robbie Ouzts was officially placed on injured reserve following a neck injury. According to ESPN's Brady Henderson, the young standout will remain sidelined for the duration of the 2026 season due to this designation occurring during the preseason. It is a tough blow for a player who earned his spot as a fifth-round pick last year, logging 12 games and 2 starts during his promising rookie campaign. Fans naturally feel the sting of losing a developing contributor, especially given the physical nature of the fullback position in our system. Mike Macdonald has kept the specific details of the injury quiet, leaving us to wonder how long this recovery will truly take. To address the vacant spot, the front office quickly signed linebacker Aaron Smith. Smith comes to us after going undrafted in 2025 out of South Carolina State, followed by a stint with the New York Jets and time on their practice squad. Here's what people are missing about this swap. While Ouzts provided a specific lead blocking presence, the decision to bring in a linebacker suggests the staff might be recalibrating their defensive depth immediately, rather than looking for a direct positional replacement. Does this move indicate we are leaning more into heavy personnel packages, or is it simply a temporary bridge while the scouts reevaluate our needs elsewhere? It is an unexpected pivot that leaves many of us questioning the internal vision for our special teams and rotational depth. If we look at how rapidly these transactions occur before the final cut-down date, we have to consider if this roster spot is truly solidified or if we are merely waiting for another shoe to drop elsewhere on the field before the real action begins. The sudden loss of Robbie Ouzts is particularly jarring because he was just beginning to find his footing as a versatile piece for this organization. Think about it this way. Our coaching staff clearly valued his potential as a fifth-round investment. Yet the reality of this neck injury means we lose that specific development path entirely before the first real kickoff. When a player who logged significant snaps during his inaugural season suddenly hits the shelf in August, the internal chemistry shifts in ways that are hard to quantify. Does this change our goal line efficiency, or are we simply shuffling bodies to survive the grind of training camp? Replacing a known quantity like Ouzts with an undrafted prospect from South Carolina State like Aaron Smith presents a massive leap in terms of NFL experience. Smith brings a fresh perspective from his time with the New York Jets practice squad, but expecting him to replicate Ouzts' familiarity with our offensive scheme is a tall order for any newcomer. Why would our leadership prioritize a linebacker arrival here if they were not already planning to test new personnel groupings? Perhaps the front office is looking for raw hunger rather than established roles at this stage of the summer. We are seeing a complete overhaul in how we handle rotational depth, and that makes me wonder if our staff is prioritizing special teams athleticism over pure positional alignment for the coming months. It remains a cold reality that a rookie's promising trajectory can be halted so abruptly by medical circumstances beyond anyone's control. We now have to hope Smith can integrate quickly enough to justify this roster spot before the regular season schedule truly heats up against the toughest teams across this league. How we adjust this week will define our success this fall. Moving past the initial shock, let's get into the deeper implications of this roster shakeup. The transition from a fifth-round fullback prospect like Robbie Ouzts to an undrafted linebacker like Aaron Smith signals a calculated shift in how we manage our depth chart as we approach the regular season. Why would we swap a physical lead blocker for a practice squad linebacker right when the preseason intensity ramps up? It suggests that our defensive scouts have identified a potential vulnerability that needs addressing before we face the gauntlet of the schedule. And I cannot stress this enough. The decision to pivot toward defensive reinforcement demonstrates a clear preference for rotational versatility over maintaining traditional offensive sets. With Smith joining the mix, we are essentially betting that his time with the New York Jets provides the fundamental discipline needed to compete at the professional level. Does this move reflect a lack of confidence in our current linebacker cores, or is it a savvy way to store developmental talent? Losing Ouzts for the entire year is a tough pill to swallow. especially since his rookie experience was just beginning to pay dividends for our special teams units. This adjustment ripples across our overall roster architecture, pushing our coaching staff to reconsider how they balance personnel during critical goal line situations. We are clearly prioritizing raw, hungry defensive assets to bolster our overall standing against divisional rivals who are currently scouting our every weakness. If we hope to secure a playoff spot, our ability to successfully integrate players like Smith will determine whether our depth can actually survive the long grind. Are we genuinely prepared for the physical toll that this season will demand, or are we just scrambling to fill holes while the rest of the league watches our next move with keen interest? Placing Robbie Ouzts on injured reserve effectively ends the immediate development of a fifth-round pick whose rookie year offered a glimpse into his role as a physical fullback. By logging 12 games and 2 starts, Ouzts had begun carving out a niche that is increasingly rare in our modern offensive scheme. What makes this even bigger is how the coaching staff decided to pivot, swapping that offensive depth for linebacker Aaron Smith. The clear upside here is versatility. By bringing in a defender who spent time on the New York Jets practice squad after his stint at South Carolina State, the team is aggressively hedging against potential injuries elsewhere. Could this imply that Mike Macdonald sees a wider path for defensive rotational talent than for a traditional lead blocker? That is the question fans are asking. The downside is equally clear. We are sacrificing an established offensive asset for a complete unknown. Some analysts suggest that waiting for waivers was a mistake, arguing that there were more experienced options available, such as seasoned veterans or even familiar faces from other practice squads. Honestly, my first reaction was skepticism because swapping a fullback for an undrafted linebacker feels like we are merely filling a roster space rather than solving a personnel problem. Is Aaron Smith really the type of hungry prospect who can make an impact? Or is this just another temporary stopgap? While the front office clearly values his fresh perspective from the Jets, it remains a gamble to lean on a player who has yet to prove himself in a real game environment. My honest take here is that this transaction signals a shift in priorities that might leave our backfield looking thin. Yet we have to trust the scouts who saw something worth claiming in Smith during the final weeks of the preseason grind. When we analyze the transition from losing Robbie Ouzts to adding Aaron Smith, the bigger picture shows a front office prioritizing defensive volume during this critical transition phase. Our franchise is betting that sheer numbers and physical competition in the linebacker room will pay off more than maintaining a